Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast. Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Scott Kellar. Coach Kellar is a former NFL nose tackle and NIU Hall of Fame athlete who transitioned into a successful career in strength conditioning. Kellar began his coaching career at DuPage Junior College under Bob McDougall. Throughout his career, Coach Kellar had stops at Bowling Green, Western Kentucky, and the University of Houston. He currently leads athletic performance at the Village School in Houston, Texas. Kellar directed athletic development for Velocity Sports Performance and founded Accelerated Performance in Houston. Over Kellar's 35-plus year career, he has helped athletes from the NFL to Olympians, and he is the author of the Ultimate Football Performance Training Handbook, a comprehensive resource on all aspects of football, training, and programming. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you. I appreciate you having us.
Well, we got to know each other from a friend. Coach Robbins hit me up on Twitter and said, or X, however you look at it now, and said, hey, you really need to check out Coach Kellar's stuff. That led to a conversation, and you sent me your book, which is absolutely amazing. So I want to say thank you for that. It was a great read.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, going through that, I mean, there's plenty of questions to ask, but just on the surface, going through that book, it's quite a thick book. You've spent a lot of time programming out a full year cycle. So you're looking at a full macro cycle.
Right.
How long did that book take to put together?
Well, Coach, I started about 20 years ago, actually, with an idea that, I wanted to give something back to the high school coaches. I know what they meant to me growing up. Coach Bob Monken, Coach Jerry Blue, Marty Quinn, all of my coaches, Coach Blasey is my freshman coach, all the time they put into us and all they put into training us. And I want to give something back to the high school coaches who may not, they've got so many things on their plate, the classes, the administrative aspect, the coaching, the X's, the O's, all of that. I want to give them something they can have, that they can use what they want, if they want to, use the whole thing, use part, whatever. But I decided, you know what, let's take the year's plan and put together options for them. So as you saw, even as we go through the yearly training cycle, what's your objective? How many days a week? How much volume? How much intensity levels, and so forth. That, and then we get into warm-ups. I give them 8 different linear warm-ups, 8 different multi-warm-ups. They could take what they want from that to help those kids, and then just give them a nice cycle, whether it be plyometrics, whether it be energy system development, strength programs, 4-day splits, 3-day splits, that they can utilize and take what they want. This isn't the holy grail. This is just a good template that I think over 20 years, I've revised probably 20 times, because you know how it is, Coach. Boy, this really worked. This really helped our kids. Let's see how it evolves over time. And that's what these 4 and 3-day programs did, was they evolved over time. So after the 2017, 18, 19, 20 seasons here at Village, we had enormous success where we were in the state championship game every year. And I looked at what we did and I said, this really was a recipe of consistent success. So we put it, again, adjusted and put it to paper. And then I said, I finally got to shut this down and put it out there.
Yeah. I went through the book. I looked at your 4-day and your 3-day. Both of them were very good. They both fall into if you have multi-sport athletes or if you have just guys dedicated to one sport. Mm-hmm. The 4-day falls very close in line with what we do. So I was able to kind of look through that and see how I could program what we do into your 4-day model. And then you break it down into your mesocycles, and you have kind of like almost working through Vermeil's pyramid of athletic needs. You start with a very wide base of strength, and then you move up through that till you get to the season, and you're just really looking at speed outputs. Going through all of that, when you set all that up, is that something that you had done at your previous stops, or is this a compilation of everything that came together and then you brought that to the Village School?
I think both, Coach. I think when I look at what I did with the collegiate athlete, and then I look at what we did at Velocity, and then what we did at Village, I said, okay, we've got to curtail this so that it takes care of the population we have. And so we just made some minor adjustments Obviously, with our dynamic training, our dynamic effort work, we don't have the maturity level until maybe some of our juniors and seniors. That's when we pull out our tendo units and so forth and start putting that into play, which I really like. Because at one point I thought, I know my kids, I know how fast they're moving a bar, but until you really put that on them and get them to understand the concept, it's a big difference maker. So I had to adjust some of that. And but really, all in all, you're following a template of GPP to basic strength, to strength power, to speed, strength, speed, strength, and so forth. So to answer your question, I did. I kind of said, this is what I'm gonna take. This is how we're gonna phase it for our kids and move forward. And that's why I said that's where 2017 through 21 really came into play, where that consistent model really worked for our kids.
I like that you had both in there, and you don't read a lot of books that compile both. So you had the 3 day week for your multi sport athlete, which is very tierish, I would say,
Right.
full body, 3 days a week. But then you could separate that off. They could be in the weight room with the other guys. They could be around their team. But then
Mm-hmm.
your solo guys in one sport could really hit it hard as well. So not to say it's
Right.
individualized, but somewhat it is.
Correct. Correct. Because right now, for instance, when we go back to school Monday, our our boys basketball and girls basketball, because of time constraints, we have to do some micro training. So we'll bring them in. We'll do about a 4 to 6 minute warm up, and then they get into three lifts. And then we're going to do a triple extension. We're going to do maybe everybody varies because some kids are going to do a high pull, some kids are going to do a power clean, some kids are going to do a hand clean. But we're going to do that. We're going to perform that Olympic lift, and we're going to do a jump, and then we're going to do a little dumbbell incline or bench press, depending upon the day, and a pull. And then they're out. They got to go to practice. They're going to be on the floor. This gives us a chance though to work with them and see them every day. We're going to say, okay, how do you feel? Where are you at? Because those practices are hard. And then when they come off a game or they might come off a tournament, boy, we got to really adjust that a little bit. Instead of 4 sets, we're down to 2 to 3 sets. But they're getting exposed to it every day, a little something every day. Dynamic effort work for our upperclassmen day before a game, hit that CNS and let them roll. Yeah. And then then we'll have our other kids coming through, whether they're on a 4 day or a 3 day split. Yeah.
The microdosing idea, that's I think in a town where I live in that's so small that kids play so many sports, that's about the only way to attack it. If you stay too rigid on what you want as a
Yeah.
strength coach, they just won't show up because
Right.
they'll just stick with their sport, or their coach will actually keep them away from you because he
Yeah.
thinks or she thinks that you're making them too tired.
Right. Exactly. When they're when they're not excited about doing coming in, no, not every kid's going to be excited, right? Especially your basketball guys, your soccer guys. So you have to do something to get their attention. So whether that's just you can't really explain how you do it from a positivity aspect, but you keep it positive. You keep them thinking how this, and I try to explain to our kids how this relates to the pitch, to the court, to the field, and they get it. Over time they get it. You encourage them. You make sure you touch those kids every day. You see those kids as you're going around the room, and you give them a little nugget of, hey, that's a great job. Now you got to work on this, whatever it might be. But keep them involved, keep them excited. If I kept them there 45 minutes to an hour, that's drudgery because they're thinking, I got to go down to the court, you know, or I got to get to practice. It keeps it flowing nicely for us.
I had watched or listened to a podcast that you were on, and you kind of touched on that just a little bit. But I think in there you had mentioned when you are being complimentary and you are seeing things your athletes are doing well, be specific about that. Not just, hey, you're doing great.
Right.
Really point out what they're doing great at, and that will help kind of the buy in, maybe.
Right. Exactly. Because if I give a young man or young woman three things to think about, they're not going to listen to anything. But you got to dissect what's the most important thing they need to be working on at that very moment. Is it bar path? Is it keeping your feet in the ground on the bench press so nothing else moves except the bar and your arms moving that bar from chest to top? What is that one key factor? Like for instance, when we're teaching acceleration wall drills, for example, keep the ankle doors flexed. So if I said ankle doors flexed, positive shin angles, don't break the hip, no posterior tilt, well, they're not going to get better at anything. So what's most important? Let's start with dorsiflexion. Okay. Okay. Now, okay. Boom, boom, boom. You hit that. Boom. Let's work shin angles. Okay. Let's not dump on that support leg. Dump and punch. So whatever it might be, give them something to work on, and let's concentrate on that. And then you can build off of that.
That makes a ton of sense. I find myself every once in a while needing to step back and realizing I'm overcoaching. You get a look on an athlete's face and you're like, okay, that was too many words. We need to dial it back and get to one
Right. Right.
specific
Right.
thing and let's get that
Right.
fixed.
Exactly. Exactly. I get ahead of myself too. I'll get excited. I'll get excited and say, okay, and then they look at you like a deer in headlights. I'm counting hair follicles on the back of their head when I'm looking at them. Like, oh, they're not getting it. So, yeah, I got to dial that down a little bit.
It becomes where you can see what the finished product should be, and they're so close in a lot of respects that you're just like, if I could just give them the right information, we'd be there faster. But
Right?
you can't get there faster.
No, no. And it's like everybody's got a different squat depth, for instance, and they're not all going to be sitting in the hole like you want them all together, every single one of them. So you've got to work independently with each one. Ankle flexion here, knee slide there, too much forward tilt. Get the bar up on the back just a little bit, or it's too high up, whatever it might be. So you got to work with the kids individually to get them where you want them to be. And like you say, it's not going to get there today or maybe even tomorrow, but it eventually they're going to learn and then they're going to feel great about it.
And what I found with young athletes is as they start figuring out the pieces, they'll help each other if you stay back a little bit and let them handle it.
Right, exactly. We've got a few kids right now. We've got 4 or 5 kids right now. It was before break, and I was some. There were 2 racks. I needed to get to it right away, and before I got to it, Matthew Lou and Caleb Barnes are over there helping our kids out, and that's the leadership too that you're looking for, right? I mean, you're looking for the leadership, but you also know, man, I got some coaches in here, so you give them some autonomy too to help these guys, and they may take it from them a little better than you. And you got to be, I tell guys all the time, I'm unoffendable, and that's the one thing as a coach you want to be is unoffendable to yourself and from others because uh, we're in a service business, and you've got to be, it should be always about what's best for that kid or that team or what have you. So even when a coach says, coach, I'm not coming away from today, I'm not offended by that. You need more time on the court, you need more time at practice, whatever it might be, that's fine. We're here when you need us.
As I've gotten older and done this longer, I hope that I've taken on that mentality. I'll get a text from an athlete, hey, I'm not going to make it today. Okay. Like you said, we'll be here when
Right.
when you're ready to come back because their life is just as chaotic as our lives. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And today, kids have so many different choices to make on a daily basis. So many things coming at them. And it's they've got a lot on their plate. And at our school, we're an IB school, an interbaccalaureate degree program, and it's very intensive. We've got tremendous teachers at our school. We've got great coaches. We've got great teachers, and but the academic load is quite high and demanding. So we have to keep that in mind also.
yeah, and as much as the weight room could help mentally with a lot of that, it is an
Right,
added pressure that they
right,
have to take on in their schedule.
right. Exactly, exactly. And you try to get the kids to understand. You're talking about 15, 16, 17-year-old kids, trying to get them to compartmentalize their day, right? And say, okay, it wasn't the greatest day. You got up late, you missed breakfast. Okay, you had a bad day in one of your classes. Something else happened. So you come into the weight room, you got all that in your mind. And so you try to talk to them about it, try to get them out of that funk and ready to go. Give us 45 minutes. You're going to feel better when you're done. And a lot of times that helps. And a lot of times it does. But hopefully it helps them enough when they go home, they take care of business and move forward. Yeah,
And it may take that whole session to get them out of that funk.
exactly. Exactly. It's a process just like anything else because they're still thinking about it, but they're trying to do what you're asking them to do. It might not be at the right intensity level you want, but you got to bear in mind what these kids are dealing with. And I'm not saying go soft, not at all, because I still think you need to drive home. Everything starts and ends with discipline. So if you're going to enter those doors, we need all of you. Okay. And it might take myself and my assistant to help you through that, but you still got to give it.
Now, through all of your time coaching athletes and specifically football, what is some of the biggest mistakes you've made in football performance and getting athletes ready?
Possibly pushing too hard at the end of a cycle, not giving enough rest time for our athletes to perform. Ran into that with my first combine group. Right, it was boy, you see them improving and improving. Combine's about 10 days away, and I'm driving, I'm pushing, and a couple of guys said, "Coach, I'm burning a little bit." You got to realize I learned how to learn when to pull back a little bit. And that's kind of like the Hayes in a barn. They're 10 days away from the biggest interview of their life. Backed off a little bit, refined a few things. And it's just like in track when you're tapering for that state meet or that district meet. The work's been done and you got to taper them down so they're ready to peak. That's kind of the same way. So that's kind of one thing I've learned is to pull back a little bit and read the room just a little bit better.
That's the one unique thing that as I've worked through this, I've think that I've noticed more and more is you cannot get ahead in strength conditioning. You can't chase next cycle or chase next week's numbers
Mm,
because it's just going to slowly catch up with you and then you're going to have an avalanche at the end where it just doesn't do what you want it to do. It's you are
exactly.
where you are right there.
Right. Right. And I need to recognize. I mean, I remember at Bowling Green. I was at when I got to Bowling Green. I was doing 6 week cycles, and the first 6 week cycle we did well. So the second 6 week cycle, I noticed at about week 4, man, we're pushing some really good numbers. But the next 2 weeks, I saw a dip in performance, and so I thought maybe 6 week is we got to find a happy medium. Maybe the 6 week isn't what we need. Maybe we need to condense it to 4 and then have a deload and then we test. And that worked out tremendously for us. So since about 2000, I've really stayed with our 4 to 5 week cycles that really showed that we had some good progressions as we went along. Plus, the kids didn't quote burn out. We didn't have the fatigue factor setting in.
Those shorter cycles give you a little more time to regroup and see what's going on and you're not stuck in the middle of a long cycle.
Right, right. And you're not forcing it. We got to force 92%. We got to force 95. We got to force 98. It's just okay. We'll evaluate where it's at. If we need an extra week, we'll take an extra week. But that extra week might be a deload week. We might be working on bar speed. We might be working on a little complex work, whatever it might be. But I tell you what's worked really well for us is, for instance, my 4 day. When we go back Monday, we'll start our 4 week for football, and we'll go Monday upper. I'm sorry, Monday lower, Tuesday upper, Thursday, Friday split. And so Monday, yeah, we're gonna power high pull. We're gonna squat. We're gonna push jerk. We're gonna push jerk, then squat, and then RDL, and then we're gonna hit. We shrug and we do a shoulder stabilization program. Okay, and then Tuesday, we're going to come back with upper body. We're going to hit we're going to contrast our bench press with our Pendlay or bent over row. And because we've been working a lot of the Pendlay row, I really like that. Kids have got a lot out of that, but we'll probably start with our bent over row, and then we work from there. We do a leg complex, unilateral work, working mobility and so forth, and then we work our tri-bi and a shoulder, and then we follow that up Thursday and Friday. Now, when we come back for the next 4 weeks, I'll switch that up. I'll switch the days, and then I'll take our power clean and move it to Tuesday. When we're working on, I'm sorry, we'll keep it on Monday with the upper body day, and just to change things up, change that stimulus a little bit, and then go legs on Tuesday, legs on Friday, and Thursday upper. Yeah, and that seems to really work and keeps their mind stimulated, keeps them on a growth path. Yeah.
You were talking about the Pendlay row. I had it this time of year. Kids are all coming back from college, and we're starting our cycle for them to get them ready for
Mm-hmm.
summer workouts. And the Pendlay row come up, and they said how much they thought it increased their bench press when we programmed that in because
Right.
their back was so much stronger.
Right.
And now they're asking for that row to be in. Where in the
Right.
beginning they didn't want nothing to do with that row.
No, they really don't. And then they treat it like a bent over row. I'm like, no, 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 no. We got to stay firm, flat back, pull, dump, pull, dump. And some of our kids, I pulled off of it only because, as you know, they don't have the core strength and stability to maintain that posture. Because generally, we'll go from a incline chest supported row to a bent over row to pendlay row. That's kind of that progression we use for that. We use we do a lot of back, and getting the kids to understand how much the stronger the back, the stronger the bench. Right? The stronger your overhead press, the stronger your bench press. The more pull-ups you're going to do, the more mobility you're going to have, what have you.
Now, have you found that the Pendlay row helps in the clean, especially with that first pull? I mean, your shoulders are over the bar a little bit more than the
Mm-hmm.
deadlift. Do you think that helps going into your second pull, being better at that row?
I think so. I think being better at that row, bent over row, I think both of them really complement that the clean. I really do. The stronger the back, it helps with the clean and helps with the deadlift as well. We really teach our kids how to feel the lats in the deadlift too. But in the clean, certainly they're able to hold the shoulders back just enough so we don't get the roll of the humerus. So yeah, I do believe that the strength of the back helps in that getting that chest, keeping that chest over the bar. Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned Bowling Green, and I think me and you had talked off air. You were with Urban Meyer there. Being the strength coach for Urban Meyer before he went on to Florida and did all the things he did, how demanding was he on what his athletes were doing when you were there?
Very much. Extremely demanding. The one thing I loved about him is he was demanding, highly disciplined, his intensity level. I loved it. His vision was tremendous, but the demand on the players and the coaching staff was immense. But that's the way it should be if you're going to be a champion. And I think he went 9-3 that first year, 12-0 the next year, and won the MAC. Then went on to Utah. But I love that about him, his organization. And it was interesting because Gary Blackney was the head coach when I took the job, and he had been there about 14 years, I want to say. And I remember interviewing for the job, and I talked to Coach Blackney. I asked about his longevity. I said, "Are you still going to be here?" And I was, "Oh, absolutely. I love Bowling Green." Da, 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 da. Well, I think it was 7 weeks into the season, he resigned. And he said, "At the end of the year, I'm going to retire. I'm resigning." And so we had just come off a loss to Buffalo, who had the longest losing streak in the country. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I told my wife, I said, I don't know what's going to happen. And so I remember Coach Meyer's interview. One of the questions he asked me was, "How long you been here?" And I said, "Coach, I got to be honest with you, I've been here 4 months." And he said, "Okay, good. Because if I get this job, if you were here 2, 3 years, I'd probably fire you." And I get that. That's the business. But he kept me on. We worked well together. I remember one day specifically, we're going at it on a Friday, high intense day in the weight room. We're humping it pretty good, and the phone rings. Well, the phone is around the corner at the front entrance of the weight room, which had no air conditioning, no heat. So it's ringing. I hear it ringing. I'm not going to get it. We're going hard. So we get done. He comes down. He says, "Did you hear the phone ringing?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "When that phone rings and I call, I want you to answer it." He says, your strength coach is the most important person on my staff. You're more important than anybody on the staff." I said, "I got you, coach. I'll answer that call." He says, "If you call me, I'm in a meeting with the president. I'm taking your call." I said, "Okay, I got you, coach." But he said later, he said, I did like the fact that you were concentrating on the kids, on the players. That's the kind of guy he was. First day I had a warm up. He had the whole team out there. We're in warm ups and we're going back and forth. And he's just like, "Listen," he's like, "Come on, Kellar. I mean, we're 30 seconds in. Get this over with. I don't want any stretching. We don't need stretching." He's just pressuring you to see if you're going to crack. He's going to see, he's just testing you. And so he put his chair in front of the desk. And so when you come in to meet, it's lower. So I stood there. I stood up. I said, "I'm going to sit here like this." But I stood up and I said, "Have a seat." But he was, I loved his discipline, his intensity, his organization, and his expectation. Because when he expected out of everybody else, he delivered himself. And that's what I respect about a coach. And then obviously 6 months later, I took the job at Houston. But yeah, that time was I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
And I didn't want to make it about Urban. I have this backup question to that is somebody like that you're working for that has that vision and that success, how did that change how you coached?
It just impressed upon me more and more how you have to be so much more organized in seeing 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, and how the discipline of what you do every second of your day has to be spot on. The clarity of your direction has to be spot on. And if you're saying one thing, you've also got to act it. And that was instilled in me with my parents. All right. So it's not like that was something new. He just brought a different intensity level, in which I loved, that we hadn't had in a head coach. Now, Gary Black is a great guy. I loved him. But we didn't have that level. And that's the level you need to be a champion. You've got to act like a champion long before you've ever become a champion. And I try to press that upon our kids, every day. And it's not just weight you lift. It's not the volume. It's not the scheme. It's nothing. It's about being a person, a good person. Are you holding the door open for that person with a box in their hands behind you? Are you being cognizant of other people? Are you doing what's right every single day? Coach Saban he talks about the meaning of nothing. Now, I don't know if you saw that little piece he does. To be disciplined takes nothing. It takes no effort to give effort. What does it cost? Nothing. Hard work costs nothing. Being on time costs nothing. And that's beautiful. I mean, it's very simple too. Sometimes hard for other people though. At the same time, yeah,
Yes, sometimes the very simple concepts seem to elude us more times than not.
right, right. It really does. So, for instance, we have a thing in the weight room where a price of irresponsibility. So, yes, it is a highly academic school. So when kids come in, sometimes our kids think, "Oh well, I had to take this exam after class, so that's why I'm late." So that's great. I think you did the right thing, but you didn't tell us. You didn't text us. You didn't email us. You didn't email coach. You didn't. And now, if you text coach, that's fine. That's fine. But you didn't tell anybody. So there's a price of your responsibility. So, okay, we're going to do 25 quick up downs and we're going to go to work. So there's always that uh, self accountability has to be in play before team accountability. Does that make sense? Because if I'm not accountable, I can't expect others to be accountable. So if I'm going to say, okay, you do this, but I'm going to do that, there's no credibility.
Yeah, and you can watch that fall apart. Like, I have kids that are very locked into the weight room when they're here. And they're here, they don't miss. But they'll tell kids that they're going to be here at 4:30 and they'll be here at 5.
Right.
Well, those kids have started figuring that out, that they're not honest about what time they're going to be here. So then now they've relaxed their schedule. So now they don't show up till 5. And then if that kid shows up at a quarter till 5, he's like, well, where's everybody at? And I'm like, well, you've taught them to not show up until 5. They've went off
Right.
of what you said and then calculated that with your actions. So now you have to
Right.
wait on them because you taught them to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. That's the thing about leadership, and teaching kids how to become leaders is increasingly difficult today. I think because I mean you're generally always going to have a couple that are really outstanding and will take the reins. But sometimes kids don't want to hurt someone's feelings or go against the grain of their friends. And that's what I don't understand. And I never will understand how, if you're all working for one common goal, that the culture and the expectation and the standards are allowed to be compromised. So your standards and what you believe in are non-negotiable. And so if they're non-negotiable and somebody falls short and you correct that, I'm not saying screaming and yelling at somebody, but I'm simply telling them to get in shape with the program. Shouldn't do it affect your friendship at all. It's just this is the business we got to take care of now. You and that's what kids sometimes fall short, not having the ability to do that.
Okay, yeah, you're hitting on something that has become very apparent to me this winter. So I was fortunate enough to help with some guys that played in 2 state championships and won one, lost another, and then in between there they played and lost to a state champion, one of the best in the state. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
many they have, 12 or 13 state championships, and they played them up to the fourth quarter. I had just got used to their intensity and their capacity to do work and their willingness to hold each other's feet to the fire. Well, those guys had graduated and new group come in. It's amazing how quickly we forget what those were because the standard had dropped. Nobody was there to pick it up. And those guys come back this winter and it's like, holy cow, until we can find athletes that are willing to do this, a state championship is going to be a long ways off. So finding athletes that are
Right.
willing to do the business of it.
That's exactly right. You hit it on the head. People have said high school is kind of cyclical. You have a couple great years and then all of a sudden you're a 4 or 6 squad. Well, why is that? If 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 I was a player under that previous leadership, hopefully I learned something about that leadership and how to carry it on. But something's lacking, whether it's the will of those athletes to sustain that level of superiority in competition, whether it's, oh, I can't do that. And usually that's what it is. I can't be that guy. It's tough. You hope they learn. And I think, we had a couple of years at Village like that where we had great leadership and all of a sudden, and we're in a state championship game. We're winning a state championship in 19, unofficially in 20. By 21, those guys are gone. Then 22, the next group is gone. And you look at yourself first and you say, what am I doing? What have I changed? And that's really what I'm going to do first. Is I'm going to say, what have I done differently? So if there was something I've done differently, maybe I leaned on those guys too much. Okay, so now I got to pick that up. Maybe it's kids. Maybe we got to start at ground zero again. Maybe we've got to build those characters to where, okay, they've they're gaining confidence. They're getting better, bigger, stronger, faster. That with that, their confidence elevates. Now they become better leaders. and you think leading by example, oh, that's good. Well, I think you got to learn by example, teach by example, but also you got to now start talking about it and start getting on those kids. If you want success, you're only as good as your weakest link, right? And the behavior you're willing to tolerate is your culture. The worst behavior that you're willing to tolerate becomes your culture. So if you don't like that, correct it. You don't like it, make it go away. That's kind of something I still don't understand why. Just like you say, those guys won state championships, and all of a sudden we're so far from it. What happened? You know, and it's a lack of leadership growth.
There's a complacency that falls in there somewhere where, just like I said, maybe I forgot what the intensity was that those guys brought. I think those players do the same thing. The younger players forgot what the intensity was because they're so far removed from it that you almost make a spiral downwards until
Yeah.
somebody's willing to pick that baton up and run with it.
Right. Exactly. We had 1 year where we felt that in our summer training. I knew what the plan was for that day. And we had guys come back with former players come back to train with us. And I cut the workout shy because I couldn't finish it because the kids were just spent. And two of my guys, Griffin Rocohen and Ash Mandari, come up to me and say, Coach, where's the rest of the workout? You know, I said, look around you right now. These guys can't do it right now. We got to take baby steps with these guys. And he says, man, I remember when. I said, yeah, we need leaders like you. And we got to develop those leaders like you. That was, that's when it really became evident, right? When your former players come back to work with you and they say, boy, we want more. Because right now, we're going to have somebody go down with rhabdo because they're not going to get it. They're not going to be able to make it. I'm not going to do that to a kid. I got to look, I got to see where we're at and we're going to go from there. Just the way it is. I can't say, I wish we had this or wish we had that. We have what we have. Let's develop it.
Now, as you've went through all this, obviously you're very passionate about what you do, the coaching side of it, who you've worked with, where you've been, the book, all of that. But there was a moment in your life, I'm sure, that you didn't know where you were going to go. You were playing in the NFL. You had a great career at NIU. You're living life. You're enjoying the fruits of your labor. When did you realize that you needed to have another plan? That
Yeah,
football wasn't going to last forever, and coaching became part of that plan.
right. It was probably my third year in the NFL. And my wife and I were talking. And my wife is one of the wisest people I know. I mean, she was a teacher 27 years, retired, and her mom was a teacher. Her grandmother was a teacher. So she really knows kids and she knows teachers and she knows qualities of teachers. And she asked me one day, she said, what are you going to do when you're done? So my wife asked me this. I better have an answer because I promised to take care. I said, well, I don't know. Maybe business or maybe something. Yeah, everybody's going to start a business, right? You're going to start a business. What? Have you thought of coaching? And I said, coach? I said, no. She said, you'd be good at it. You're good with people. You're good with kids. You're good with, I spoke to kids. We'll get some camp, this, that, and the other. She said, think about it. My father-in-law was commissioner of the Mid-American Conference at one time. And he owned the Houston Bowl here in Houston. Very dynamic individual, hard worker. He was actually my brother's head football coach at Northern Illinois University. My brother, Mark Kellar, was since passed, but led the nation in rushing in 1973 at Northern and John wanted to follow his footsteps. But anyway, yeah, it was my wife who said, hey, listen, I think you'd be a good coach. And so that's kind of what inspired me, really inspired me because I took what she said and I said, I'm going to think about that. And then while I loved training. And when I was in Indianapolis, I loved to run for some reason. I loved interval training. I loved just training because since I was a kid, I was a horrible athlete. I felt that to achieve your goals, you're going to have to outwork everybody. And so that's how I've approached everything is to just work hard at it and outwork people. When I was with Indianapolis, Tom Japanzik was our head strength coach, and he really taught us, how to work. I mean, at a level of intensity that you can't describe. And so I talked to him a lot about strength conditioning, and so I thought this is something I might want to get into as a coach. And from there, I did an internship in Northern Illinois with Jim Zielinski, who really got me hooked on it in terms of strength conditioning. And then from there, boom, I had the best of everything for about 10 years, where I was an assistant football coach, head strength coach, track coach. I was teaching. I did, it was great. The coaches I coached with at DuPage were Joe Roman was our defensive coordinator, one of the most innovative coaches I've ever been around. Phenomenal coach. He expressed it as this is like Camelot at College of DuPage. We had a staff who just worked their tails off, worked for the betterment of the program. We went 36 games in a row, set an NJCA record, and it was wonderful to work that hard with a group of guys who loved each other, who loved the team. If it weren't for my wife asking me that question, we wouldn't be talking today. I don't know where I'd be. So I thank her for that. Yeah.
The one thing in that other podcast I'd heard you talk about was the transition. Just because you were a good player does not necessarily mean you're going to make a good coach. And I think sometimes we get that confused. And you'll hear people say, well, he can't coach that. He didn't even play it. Well, sometimes the guy that didn't play it sees the sport as a whole more so than the person that played it that only sees their individual position. But
Right.
you were able to step out of that defensive tackle role that you had played for so long and look at it as a broader sense, and you were able to gravitate towards a situation that you had to almost pay your dues coming back through. I know Kansas offered you a grad assistant job, which Kansas isn't very far from here, but was that a humbling experience to know that you'd played in the league and then all of a sudden the best that a big university was going to give you was a grad assistant spot?
Right. Right. I mean, I'm on the phone with Pat Rule, offensive line coach there at Kansas, and there was a defensive line job open. I said, Coach, I want to apply. And that's where being unoffendable comes into play, because he said to me, he says, Scott, you're a great player, but coaching is completely different. And we're in the Big Eight, not Big 12, but we're the Big Eight. I mean, this is not a little Pee Wee football. And so he said, I can work grad assistant position for you, whatever it might be. And, I was married, I want to make some money and do some things. So that was where I said, well, okay, I'm gonna start somewhere and grow from there. And that's when I got on with DuPage, Bob McDougall, um, who became a lifelong friend before he passed away. And he was just a marvelous coach. And I learned more coaching from he and Joe Roman and some of the other guys, Matt Foster and so forth, and Tom Minnick, who's at Highland Community College now. But yeah, as a player, you really got to humble yourself and say, okay, it's not one position you're looking at, it's 11 on defense. And then you got special teams and you got all these other things. So that was a lot of learning. It's a big learning curve. And so you really had to learn how to coach. You got to be a psychologist. You got to be a cheerleader. You got to be a disciplinarian. You have to be a teacher. You got to be so many things that when I was playing, I wasn't concerned about what the secondary was doing. Now I have to be ultra concerned about what their responsibilities are, what the linebackers are doing, because we've got to coordinate this entire thing. And we've got to learn not only the scheme, but how do you coach that inside linebacker? How do you coach that outside linebacker? How do you coach that secondary side? It was a humbling experience, but one that I just was like a sponge trying to learn everything. And I think every strength coach should probably coach another sport to see that side of it. I was so fortunate. I'm very blessed because I was able to coach football, be an assistant track coach, and then become a head track coach, coach and teach, and be able to wear all these hats and try to be the best I could be at every one of them. And I saw a lot of different avenues of coaching. And it helped me become a better strength coach because now I know what that high jumper is going to do. I know what that shot putter is doing. I know what that 800-meter runner needs. I know what that pole vaulter needs. I know now what that defensive lineman needs, what that receiver needs, what this needs. Where all those needs lie, and what the coach needs. What you've got to give the coach. How do you develop those athletes so that coach can be successful as well? I'm grateful. My wife Dana asked me that question back in 1988, 89, something like that.
As we've gotten to know each other, and I've learned more about you. I've worked through your book and listened to podcasts, and me and you have texted back quite a bit,
Yeah.
texted back and forth quite a bit. You've had to overcome a lot in your personal life away from coaching. Every day has to be a decision on how you want to live your life. You've had some major health issues. You've had to overcome them more so than what a lot of people could even fathom. But every day you get up and you pursue the things that you feel like you're driven to pursue, even with that weighing you down. How have you been able to do that?
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to wait. You got to wake up and say, you got 24. You got another 24. What are you going to do with it? When you talk about 22 brain surgeries, it's like, oh my gosh, well, how do you, okay, after 7, didn't you say, well, what's going to happen? No, I said, we're going to move on. We're going to keep going. You're going to keep pushing forward. I didn't want my wife to worry. I didn't want my daughter to worry. I told my daughter in 8th grade, I said, you know, this this is it. This one time, da 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 da. Well, she's almost 30. We still deal with some of that, but you got to be positive. You got to find ways, and I think for me, my family's everything. I wake up every morning with my beautiful wife. I've got my daughter. I've got my grandkids. I've got my in-laws down the road, my brother-in-law down the road. I have great support. I don't want to let my support down. So I've got to stand up, go back to work, and let's hit it hard. I did have to adjust because the pressures in the head, the vision loss, this, that, and the other. I have to adjust the way I coach a little bit. Although sometimes it gets out of hand, and then you're got your head on ice that night or the next morning. But it is what it is. I know God's got a plan for me and helped me get through all of it. And in 18 or 19, had bacterial meningitis twice, and that was a tough deal. But I knew you have to get up in the morning, move forward, and adjust positively. And most recently dealt with AFib a couple of times and had an ablation done about 2 months ago, and just dealing with that. So, but by the same token, like I tell the kids, if you've got 40% left, give 100% of it. Why sit back and save it? Give it, because somebody's going to get something from it. That's kind of. And I watched my mom battle cancer, but she did it positively. She did it because of love of family. So that's basically where we're at. And I've got tremendous support too at school. We've got an athletic director, Judy Klossmeyer, who's just a phenomenal human being. Loves her staff. Go to the ends of the earth for him. Our head of school, Bill DeBerg. He one of the most positive people on the planet. He's had his own adversities, but he has done so much for our school and for our teachers. We are the largest producing school in North Anglia, which owns our school. So we've got great coaches. Our assistant athletic director, Jason Cantwell, phenomenal. Does everything he can for the coaches. Our athletic trainer, Danny Ruiz, good friend of mine. We collaborate quite often. Probably, one of the best, probably the best trainer I've ever been around. And I've been around Doc O'Shea, Doc Edwards at Western Kentucky, Doc O'Shea at Houston. Doc O'Shea was phenomenal. I mean, but Danny does incredible work, and he's a CSCS guy too, so we can talk shop. But yeah, he's got great support, so you can't let that support down. You just can't.
Now, this is no way comparative to the things you've went through, and I don't want it to sound like that as I ask it, but as someone who suffers from frequent migraines, stress is the leading cause, it seems like, on a lot of it. And that will bring it on. Well, in what you do, it's highly stressful at times. How have you learned to mitigate some of that and get ahead of some of the things that you know are going to cause you problems?
Well, for instance, what drives me nuts sometimes is not being able to get in the gym during a basketball game, for instance, because the vibration and the sound in the gym is it gets debilitating. So it's like flying. I can't fly. So because of the pressures. So that's hard. So I mitigate it by, okay, I'll watch part of the game upstairs through the window. That's easy. Or a football game. I just can't stay too long because of the sound. Now, in the weight room, for some reason, the banging, the music, I mitigate the music. I bring it down a little bit because that's just it gets too much. But when it's time, I gotta remove myself from a situation where that might incite the pressure uh, and issues. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing that you're able to still continue with that in your history and knowing that there's always a potential of more to come. The outlook, just talking to you the few hours we have, the outlook is still upbeat and positive. And I don't know that everybody fights illness the same way. And so that you've managed to do that is actually incredible.
No, I appreciate that. So many people deal with so many things in their life, and I don't corner the market on adversity. I watched my mom battle it. My mom worked in a factory all her life, but did what she had to do for her family, and she had love of family. And I watched that, and I said, "How can I complain?" You know, my dad worked two, three jobs. I mean, just worked and just stayed above it. And my wife uses that term, "stay above it." Tells my daughter, when she was growing up, always stay above it. Above the criticism, above how it is in high school, especially for a young lady. It's a nonsense. Stay above it, and so that's kind of what we do. My wife does the same thing. She battles certain things, and she's an incredible lady, and we feed off each other. So, and that's a big part of it, right? I mean, your family is what you live for and what brings you through a lot. You know, and I work with supportive people as well. So it makes things a lot better.
Before we wrap up, I want to touch on the book just a little bit more because I have tons of notes on it. We didn't even hardly touch the notes. The conversation's been so good, and like I told you, the notes were just a safety net. So
No problem.
if you prepared for the notes too much, you're probably going to be in trouble because we didn't hit very many of them. But
No worries.
in the book, you talk about functional movement evaluation during warm ups and its importance, and you can see what's going on.
Right.
And I think I've come to that realization more this year than I have any other year. I've had athletes send me pictures, um, or I've watched more games on Prepcast than going to the actual games.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, I don't know if it goes back to the different things I've done in my life, but it seems like I am quicker at picking up on crookedness
Yeah.
and shifts. And other people may not even notice that I had an athlete send me a picture. He was sitting in a chair at a college and they took a picture of him. And you can see him sitting there and you can see that his hips are out just by the way he's sitting.
Hmm.
I don't know if that comes from tempering or some other things, but as you've added the functional movement evaluation more during warm ups, has that gotten easier to see that you can get ahead of some of the crookedness and things that you know are going to cause a problem down the road and you can get them off to the athletic trainer or you can program some rehabilitation workout?
Yeah, certainly, certainly. And you know what I come to find is probably I would say 7 out of 10 times when I'm looking at someone, let's just take inverted reach for a second. When I look at inverted reach and I see the hip deviation, first thing I'm going to do is coach it because the athlete might not even know they're doing it. And I say, okay, here's what I want you to adjust. I want to keep your hips stable. I want your chest to be, I have the arms spread in like an airplane and hit that same way, keep your core braced and hit the movement. And they can self correct sometimes. So sometimes it's a self correction through coaching that they get better at it rather than a real biomechanical flaw. So probably 7 out of 10 times that's the issue. However, sometimes we're one young man with scoliosis, so there's some movements he just can't do, and so yeah, I if I can't get it corrected, I definitely send him to Danny. A lot of times our trainer, Danny Ruiz, comes up to the weight room when we start, and he'll even be looking, and he'll take, I'll grab a kid and send him over to see Danny, or Danny will just grab a kid, which is great. You know, your trainer's right there. He has the ability to see things, and he can work with them. Get a PVC, contact with the head, contact with tailbone. Let's hit that. Chest out, belly tight. Let's see what we can do, how we can correct those things. But yeah, we'll do some things. Whether it might be, it might even be a balance issue. We'll do, for instance, a quad stretch to cradle. So I'll hit that quad right into the cradle. I want to see, can they balance on a single leg, or do they overcompensate? With that, we coach that up. Couple, give them a cue here or there, and sometimes it works itself out, as long as they continue to do that. But sometimes, yeah, we say, okay, we're gonna go through some quadruped work with you over here. We're gonna do this. We're gonna work on some drawing series, or we're gonna do some other things, that we work on. A lot of times, what I see with most of our athletes, ankle flexion issues and core issues. Right? I mean, and we try to hit in our programming. If you come into our weight room, we'll pre-work up every day, and we work on shoulder stabilization and mobility, and hip mobility. We'll do some 90-90s. We will do some core work. We'll do some band or payloft presses with circles. We'll do some twist and rotate, different things of that nature. We'll do some hip mobility and ankle mobility. So we work on those things, and you can see kids in that warm up that you can address. You identify. A lot of times I'll put little programs and say, okay, go hit number one or go hit number two. And before we get up, we'll go to squat or we'll go to clean. Because sometimes, with our kids too, I know we're gonna clean today. So we got tight lats. We've got a little larger biceps, so they don't get the elbows up like they like to. So we really loosen those lats up a little bit. We give them a little extra to do. So
I seem to see a lot of it in the hips and the low back. And for whatever reason, it'll twist. It seems like it'll twist them and they'll lead more with one leg than the other. And then inevitably, that will be what I think is the cause of cramps in a lot of instances. And
mhm.
so, yeah, listening to you, kind of how you evaluate and how you do. So, leads me to believe that maybe I'm on the right track in some of those areas.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Because any kind of evaluation, you're evaluating everything, even when they're in the rack. You're evaluating. Okay, um, looks like you can tell if a kid's pushing too much right leg, left leg, what have you, coming out of the bottom. That right knee gets a little walsh. You just touch on it, and you get them to push down and out, so those knees stay over the feet, and so you're pushing, ripping the floor, if you will. That sometimes corrects that. Sometimes you put the band around it, but whatever it is, you're always evaluating something. And I always talk to my coaches too, and we've got our interns coming in January 5th. We're talking about coaching position. You can get indoctrinated into just watching one position. I'm going to watch from the right side all the time on the squat. And one thing I tell our coaches, you got to move. Okay, take a look here. In a set of five, you can see 3 or 4 different angles, and getting yourself in position. Okay, that might look good. Now I'll go back to wall drill and acceleration. You're going to do a 2 count. You're standing there. You're sitting at the side for 3 sets, but you never looked in the back, and you see this. You see going from a dual track to a unit track in their knee drive, and so yeah, so it's coaching position helps out a lot.
I have a ton more questions, and we won't get to them all today. But now that you brought up wall drill, I'll skip to a few of those I had that you talk about in the book because they've become really important to me. The wall drill is one of them. It seems
Mhm.
like, and, and and you've done enough of it that maybe this will give me some insight. Some kids you can fix, like you said. You go into the wall, you got your, you want to get your dorsiflexion, then you look at that back leg. A lot of them will cave in that back leg.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of them, they just don't know what they're doing, and you can tell them, "Hey, get straight, push," and they get it.
Mhm.
Others, it doesn't matter how much coaching you do, they can't figure it out, and that
Mhm.
usually leads me to believe that it's a weak ankle. And then it seems like you can see that in their acceleration. Am
Hmm.
I kind of seeing that correctly, or do you see that a little bit different?
Yeah, I see the foot and the ankle complex as as for a lot of kids as being weak because they can't even hold dorsiflexion. You get them there, you physically fix the foot, get them to feel it, and have the shins in the right angle. You let go, one strike. Now that foot comes up, fix it, boom, that comes up again. You got to fix it again, and it all stems from that. Now we can talk about isometrics. We talked earlier about it, but that's where we do some toe raises, iso toe raises, just to strengthen that ankle a little bit. Then we got a 4-inch boxes in our weight room. We just stretch that, do a calf raise and hold, just to just try to strengthen it. We do some other modalities with the foot, but I agree with you. I think definitely that ankle position, the strength of the ankle is key.
I'll hit you with this last one. I saw it in the book, and it's obviously most of the things I stumble on are not new. I just either picked them up from a book and forgot, or they're in a book somewhere and I haven't found it.
Yeah,
But in saying that, in your book, I believe you call them Z bounds, and I may be
yeah,
getting that wrong. But you're essentially doing a lateral one-legged bound,
correct.
and then you take that into acceleration.
Mhm.
Somewhere along the way, we had stumbled on that, and it seems like you're getting a twofold coaching mechanism out of that. It seems like you can really push that long push into triple extension,
Mhm.
and then if you're if you're being cognizant, you can get that first hard step into acceleration where they feel that.
Right, right.
Is that similar to why you added that, or are you seeing more than what I just kind of expounded on?
No, and I use that usually in our training. Everything linear, we warm up and train in a linear fashion. When multi-direction, all the time in multi-direction, it's just not lateral. It's angular and also acceleration and accompanied with deceleration. So that's where I brought that because you that's why I added that. Inside edge push to inside edge push. And then from there, boom, accelerate. Why? Well, you're a commentator. I heard it on the games this weekend, yesterday, watching the games. Boy, he put that foot in the ground and then accelerated. That's what we're trying to teach in that drill to put the foot in the ground, boom, and accelerate. We just do it with repeated movement, so they get in the position with that. And I tell the kids because sometimes when they do those Z hops, the weight goes to the outside edge, and I tell them pretend you're in an A-frame and you got boom, 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 like a hockey players, and who are some of the best athletes in the world. But it's like a hockey stop on one leg, and you bip, 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 bip out, and that's kind of where I put those two complexes together. I call it a double complex. It's a double complexity. You're taking a lateral single leg hop to acceleration. Yeah,
It
that's
se- it seems like they can feel the things that are going on in there, and they can put it together quicker, and you can get through that first step faster. So now you can start working on the second and third step because it just happens. I
right.
don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, it does. And when you look at a wideout, you look at that inside the slot receiver, outside receiver, they're in that 2 point stance. They're not in a 2 point stance that we're going to teach acceleration on them. They're in 2%. But what do? Their first movement is that 2 point stance we want them in to load. So they load and go. And that's kind of what comes out of that drill. Yeah.
Now in that drill, as they're lateral bounding, it seems like it's very easy for them to get too upright and that shin angle drops. Will you have them hit a lateral bound and then drop the knee over the toe, hit the next one, do the same thing so that when they do hit that first step, they are in an accelerated position and not more so in a top speed position?
Right. Because initially when you teach it, it's a one count. So it's jump, hold, sit down, get down in that athletic position, drive out of it, triple extend laterally, boom, get in it, and then extend out, get in. And so that every one of those you want to get into that athletic position. And then as you make it, then we'll go to a 2 count, which is over back hold, over back hold. and then we get into over, out. And yeah, but every time you're trying to sit them down, absorb that force on that inside edge, and then bound out of it.
I found that I use that drill and the wall drill a ton when you're teaching kids to accelerate in the beginning. Then after that, we can move into some other stuff. But those two drills combined with each other create so
Mhm.
much acceleration, and you can watch their times drop almost immediately.
Right, right. And then you can build off of that linear acceleration and then into load and accelerate laterally. Sometimes like baseball guys you can get something out of that. Baseball guys can get that load crossover sprint from first to second, second, third, you know.
There's so much more in the book to discuss. And, anybody that's looking for a full cycle and with the room to program the things you want, your book is very good. I wish we could have touched on more of it, but there was so much other stuff to talk about that,
No problem.
uh, you put a really good price on it. It's affordable. You can lay out, you can print everything out. You can look through all of your exercises from your strength building exercises clear through to your top speed exercises. I mean, it's an exhaustive resource that to undertake that had to have been incredible. And I'm appreciative that you sent it to me for me to look through.
Well, I appreciate taking the time to look through it. I really am. And we're going to what we're trying to put together now for coaches is that to accompany the book, you've got the warm ups in one section, you've got the warm ups, you've got the drills and so forth, acceleration, max velocity, and multi direction. We're condensing it to where it's a folder you open up. I'm going to take acceleration one, and I'm going to take warm up one, acceleration, workout eight, and I've got them. I go to work, and also the position specific drills. I can We're going to have them laminated. Coach can then just pull them and hand them to their position groups, and they can go to work from there without having to go to the book and print it all off. But so that's going to be coming out as well.
What I liked about it was it wasn't so specific of a blueprint that you didn't feel like as a coach you weren't doing the things you wanted. It was a very good breakdown. You broke it clear down into 6 week cycles, 3 week cycles, whatever it is you want to do as a coach. You can put in the things you want, but you have a great calendar for
Right.
how you want to do the things you want to do.
Right. And I think giving them a vision of what you want to do at each period of the year, just wanted to give them that so that, you know what, it becomes easier. Now, do you have to, maybe you can change it up any way you want that fits your facility, fits the time frame you have. And just like those acceleration, multi-directional, and max velocity programs, maybe you're just practicing drill work and not getting into the applied uh, application. Maybe don't have time for it, but anytime you can work on rhythmic movements, you can work on. Well, okay, we're just going to get out of the gate today. We're going to do some flying tens. We're going to do some flying 30s on max velocity. We'll do some butt kickers to step over run mechanics, to heel recovery, whatever it might be, to fast leg. Okay, let's hit some 30s. Let's go. You know, whatever coaches can get out of it, that's what I want them to get out of it, whatever they need.
I am an information junkie, so anytime I can look through books like that, I
Yeah.
always enjoy them, and then I can set them down to some other books and look at how they compare and maybe the points that, let's say, you pointed out compared to some points that maybe Pat Ivy or somebody else pointed out, see how they line up and how it can become cohesive,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe some ideas that one book didn't grab from another. I always enjoy that too. So
Yeah.
then you got
Right.
a comparative of what you're looking at.
Right. Right. I think strength coaches, I think everybody's really, especially at the collegiate level, doing the same things. Everybody's doing the same things, maybe different looks of culture. Again, what are your standards? What are you not going to compromise on? That's really what it comes down to because you're doing a lot of the same stuff and everybody's working hard. What bothers me sometimes in our profession are the guys who are really good at what they do talk badly about other coaches, talk badly about, oh, uh, there's a tremendous speed guy out there right now. Phenomenal, smart, very good at what he does, but bashes football coaches. And I'm like, everybody's working hard for the same outcome. So help, but we don't need that other stuff. That's why I got off Twitter. To be honest with you, X, Twitter, whatever. I got off it for that reason. But anyhow, I just wish people would understand everybody's working hard. Everybody's got the kid's best interest in mind, and just what you're doing is tremendous. It makes other people better. So I appreciate you.
Well, Coach, I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the time. I know, things are limited right here around the holidays, so you blocked off, a few hours for us to sit down and do this, and I'm really appreciative of all of you've done to make this happen.
Well, appreciate you asking and taking the time to read the book, and it means a lot.
Well, Coach, I hope you have a great rest of your day and get ready to go back to school tomorrow and get back after it.
There we go. All right. I appreciate you. Thank you.